Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between lush green hills and dense forests, there was a place called Lumina. Life in Lumina was simple and pure, a place where traditional values were cherished and preserved from generation to generation. One of the most important traditions in Lumina was the rule of purity. Every girl had to keep herself pure until marriage. It wasn't just a value. It was a matter of pride for each family in Lumina. The villagers lived peacefully among the lush green trees and cool streams, trusting each other and the rules that had maintained the village for countless generations. The mothers in the village were always proud of their daughters. They would say to each other, "My daughter is pure, she is the pride of our family, just like all the other girls in Lumina." The village of Lumina was considered a place where purity and love were the most precious things. However, that peace began to waver one day when a stranger set foot in the village. Amara, a girl from a distant city, came to Lumina to visit her aunt. Her arrival brought a new breeze into the village, a breeze that no one could have expected would bring such a great change. Amara was completely different from everyone in Lumina. She wore vibrant, glittering clothes with bold cuts that revealed the confidence and pride of a city girl. Her eyes were sharp and her smile radiant. Amara moved with a freedom that the girls in Lumina could only imagine. She caught everyone's eye. The young men looked at her with admiration and longing, while the young women looked at her with curiosity and awe. "Look at her," Mila, one of the village girls, whispered to her friend, her eyes never leaving Amara. "She walks like she owns the world." Zuri, Mila's best friend, nodded, her eyes filled with longing. "She makes everything look so easy. I wonder what it would feel like to be like that." Amara's presence not only drew attention but also sparked dreams that the village girls had never thought of before. They began to compare themselves to her, admiring the freedom and confidence that Amara exuded. The young men in the village watched Amara's every step, unable to hide their fascination as she walked past them, her long black hair flowing in the wind and her laughter ringing out like a mysterious invitation. But no one knew that behind her proud exterior and free-spirited demeanor, Amara was hiding a secret that would change the lives of everyone in Lumina forever. That secret began to reveal itself when Amara often went out at night, alone, with no one knowing where she was going. Silent shadows, secret meetings. Amara was not as simple as she appeared. This made the village girls curious, wanting to understand what made Amara so special. What was she doing at night? Who was she meeting? And why did she have new gifts, sparkling necklaces and golden coins that no one had ever seen before? Mila and Zuri gradually could not resist their curiosity and decided to find out what was really going on with Amara. That night, Mila and Zuri decided to secretly follow Amara. The two girls sneaked out of their homes late at night, quietly trailing behind Amara through the dim paths of Lumina. The faint moonlight filtered through the tree branches, creating shadowy figures that added to the mysterious and suspenseful atmosphere. The two girls held their breath as they followed, not daring to make a sound. Amara walked confidently, never looking back, and eventually stopped at a small forest on the edge of the village. Mila and Zuri hid behind some bushes and watched as Amara met a man, a merchant from outside the village. The man smiled at Amara, handed her a small bag, and Amara smiled charmingly, leaning closer to whisper something that made him laugh. Mila and Zuri were stunned to see Amara accepting the bag of gold coins, and when she turned to leave, the satisfaction was clear on her face. Zuri whispered, "Did you see that, Mila? What did she do to get those coins?" Mila didn't reply, but deep down she knew Amara had done something different, something she had never dared to think about. There was something inside them, a feeling of curiosity, a mix of envy and longing for the freedom Amara showed. The next day, Mila couldn't keep the matter to herself. She shared it with a group of her close friends, recounting what she and Zuri had witnessed. The girls listened in surprise and eagerness, their eyes wide as they imagined the glittering gifts and the freedom that Amara had. If Amara can do it, why can't we? Layla, one of the more prominent girls in the group, said defiantly. She always wanted to try new things and was never afraid to take risks. So, one by one, the girls in the village began to imitate Amara. They started wearing bolder clothes, putting on heavier makeup, trying to create the same allure as Amara. The secret nights became a habit, meetings in the dark, daring smiles, and gifts received from merchants or men from the village. Amara noticed the change in the girls, and she saw it as an opportunity. She became a leader, arranging meetings between the girls and men from other villages, each time taking a parting gift as a service fee. Amara became the center of the change, the leader of these mysterious encounters. She created a secret network that no one in the village knew about except for the girls involved. Life in Lumina gradually changed in a way that no one could have expected. The girls became bolder and more defiant, forgetting the old traditions, the values of purity and dignity that the elders in the village had always tried to uphold. They were caught in a whirlwind of curiosity and desire, like moths rushing toward the flame, unaware of the consequences. But darkness could not last forever. One day, the first signs of unrest began to appear. The trees around the village gradually turned yellow, and the once healthy animals became weak and tired. The villagers began to whisper, unable to understand what had happened, why their once peaceful village had fallen into such gloom and hardship. Everyone felt that something had changed, that perhaps a curse had fallen upon Lumina. But no one knew that the change had begun with the secret meetings, with the secrets that Amara had brought. The dark days began to engulf the village of Lumina. The once lush trees now withered, the animals grew frail and lifeless, and the villagers began to fall ill with strange fevers and pains that no one could understand. Panic spread among the villagers. They wondered if the gods were angry for some unknown reason. The elders decided to hold an emergency meeting in the village square. Obasi, considered the village seer and the one who communicated with the gods, was called to determine the cause of this misfortune. The villagers gathered, their faces filled with worry and hope for answers from Obasi. Obasi stood before the villagers, closing his eyes for a moment as if listening to a message from the gods. Finally, he opened his eyes and his voice was filled with authority. The gods are very angry. They say that the purity of the village has been destroyed. To appease their anger, we must find 2 pure maidens to offer to the gods as a gesture of atonement. The entire village fell silent, unable to believe what they had just heard. The parents, once proud of their daughters, now worried about whether they could find anyone who still maintained their purity to fulfill this ritual of atonement. Doubt and panic began to spread across the confused faces. The next day, all the young women of Lumina were summoned to the village square. Obasi stood in front holding a sacred necklace. Only a pure maiden could draw the necklace from the clay pot blessed by the gods. The girls lined up, each taking their turn, trying their luck. Each hand reached into the pot, but none could retrieve the necklace. The tension in the village grew as each girl failed. People began to look at one another with confusion, and worried whispers spread through the crowd. No one understood why none of the girls could succeed. Layla, Mila, Zuri. They all failed. Finally, it was the village chief's daughter's turn, but she too could not draw the necklace. All eyes began to turn toward Amara, the one who had brought change to Lumina. Accusatory whispers began to spread through the crowd. "It's Amara who brought this upon us," a woman shouted, her voice filled with anger. The villagers began to shout, calling out Amara's name, blaming her for the gods' anger and all the terrible things that had happened. Amara stood there, feeling the hatred of the villagers, understanding that her secret had been exposed. Her actions, the manipulations, and the secret meetings had led to these dire consequences for the village. Amara knew she could not run. She had to face everything she had caused. Amara stood there, surrounded by the villagers, her eyes betraying the confusion and fear she felt. Accusations rang out from every direction, like daggers piercing her heart. The villagers who had once loved her for her freshness, her beauty, and her confidence, now looked at her with eyes full of resentment. The children who had admired her now hid behind their parents, staring at her with puzzled eyes, not understanding why Miss Amara had caused all this. Obasi stepped forward, holding the sacred necklace in his hand. He looked at Amara, his voice cold and commanding. "Amara, you are the one who brought the curse to Lumina. Your disregard for tradition has angered the gods." Obasi's gaze was icy, devoid of sympathy or patience. Amara could feel the condemnation, not only from him, but from the entire village. Amara tried to speak, her voice trembling. "It's not my fault. I didn't know. I never thought things would get this bad." But her words were drowned out by the angry shouts of the crowd. They did not want to hear excuses, they wanted atonement. Obasi raised the necklace high, declaring to the entire village, "Amara will be the one to carry this necklace to the sacred altar in the temple within the forest. This is the only way to appease the gods and atone for our sins." The crowd fell silent for a few seconds. Then they nodded in unison, seemingly agreeing with Obasi's decision. Amara knew she had no other choice. She had made a great mistake, and now she had to face the consequences. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not cry out. She knew that crying or pleading would change nothing. She had to be strong, for if she wasn't, there would be no one to save her from the judgment of the villagers. Asha, the little girl who had always played with Amara, stepped out from the crowd, her eyes filled with tears but shining with compassion. "Miss Amara," Asha said, her voice choking, "I believe in you. I know you didn't mean to hurt anyone." Asha knelt beside Amara, gripping her hand tightly for a moment before being pulled away by her mother. Asha's gaze gave Amara a glimmer of hope amid the storm of punishment, and she smiled at the girl. A weak but sincere smile. Amara took the necklace from Obasi, her hands trembling, but her resolve solidified. She had to right her wrongs, not just for herself, but for Asha and for the children of the village who still believed in her. She turned and began walking toward the path leading into the forest, her figure gradually disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind only heavy sighs and anxious looks from the villagers. The path to the sacred temple was one that no one wished to walk alone, especially at night. The dense trees seemed to want to swallow her whole, the hooting of owls and strange sounds from deep within the forest, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and fear. Amara continued, her bare feet crunching on the dry leaves beneath her, her heart pounding in her chest, but she did not stop. In the darkness, Amara remembered her first days in Lumina. The smiles, the warm welcomes from the villagers, the admiring glances from the girls and the curiosity of the children. But all of that had changed. She knew she had made mistakes, but now she was ready to make amends. The sacred temple appeared before her with its moss-covered stone walls as if it had stood there for centuries. Amara stepped inside, her feet stopping in front of the altar where she had to place the necklace. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, whispering a prayer to the gods, seeking forgiveness. In that moment, Amara realized that this journey was not just about atoning to the gods, but also about facing herself, facing her wrong choices and her desire for freedom that she had not fully understood. Amara knelt before the sacred altar, the heavy necklace in her hands. The pale moonlight filtered through the tree branches, creating a cold and mystical atmosphere. She placed the necklace on the altar, then closed her eyes, praying silently. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she remembered the mistakes she had made and her longing to atone for everything. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through the temple, the rustling leaves sounding like the whispers of the gods. Amara opened her eyes, and she saw the necklace glowing, the light spreading as if responding to her prayer. The altar shook, and from beneath it, a secret door slowly opened. Amara looked inside, her eyes glimmering with both worry and wonder. She realized that this door could be the answer, but it could also lead her to a new danger. However, there was no turning back. She knew she had to go on. Amara stepped down, each step sinking into the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. but she did not stop. Below, she found a large room with ancient symbols carved into the walls. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal on which lay an old scroll of parchment. Amara approached, unrolling the scroll and reading the ancient words. What she saw chilled her to the bone. The summoning ritual Obasi planned was not only intended to control Lumina, but also to bring eternal darkness to the village. Amara knew she had to act quickly. She had to destroy the necklace. It was the key to stopping everything. Without hesitation, Amara grabbed a large stone from the altar and struck the necklace hard, shattering it into pieces. A blinding light filled the room, then gradually faded. Amara was exhausted. She sat down on the stone floor, but inside, she felt a sense of relief. She had done the right thing, even if it meant facing the hatred and hostility of the people. She left the temple, her feet weary, but her spirit full of determination. As she emerged from the forest, she saw the villagers gathered in the square, their eyes filled with anticipation. Amara approached them, looked directly at them, and said, "The curse has been lifted. I destroyed the necklace and stopped the dark ritual, but I understand that my mistakes have caused you all great suffering." The crowd fell silent. No one spoke. They didn't know what to feel, anger or gratitude. But they knew that Amara had dared to stand up and right her wrongs, and that was a truth they could not deny. The next morning, the villagers gathered in the square where Obasi had once stood before them to announce the atonement ritual. This time Amara stood there, no longer afraid, but filled with determination and a desire to face everything. She recounted her journey to the temple, the necklace, and the ancient scrolls she had found. The villagers were silent, each feeling a chill of fear as they heard about Obasi's dark scheme. The elders exchanged glances, their eyes showing both horror and trust in Amara's courage. Obasi stood nearby, his face no longer proud, replaced instead by fear and defeat. Mira, one of the elderly leaders, stepped forward. "Amara, you made mistakes, but you also atoned for us. Today, we need to reflect on ourselves and the values we once upheld." Mira's voice brought peace and hope, something Lumina had lacked during its dark days. Amara bowed her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking but full of sincerity. "I can't change the past, but I want to help this village rebuild for the future." Amara's tears were not a sign of weakness, but a manifestation of genuine remorse and the desire to make things right. A moment of silence enveloped the square, then Asha, the young girl who had always believed in Amara, stepped forward and clasped her hand. "Miss Amara, we trust you," Asha said loudly, her eyes shining brightly. Others began to nod, and then the applause grew, gradually spreading across the square. Obasi was taken away, his power over Lumina now gone. The elders decided that he would have to leave the village to atone for his malicious schemes. Amara, along with the villagers, set out to rebuild Lumina, not just repairing the physical damage, but also healing the emotional wounds. She worked tirelessly, helping everyone, becoming a genuine part of the community. She knew that trust wasn't easily regained, but she was willing to spend her whole life proving she was worthy of it. The dawn shone upon Lumina, a dawn of forgiveness, unity, and hope. The villagers decided to open their hearts, to preserve their traditions, while also learning to forgive and move forward. Amara stood beside Asha, looking toward the horizon. "We made it through everything," she said, smiling at the young girl. "The future of Lumina will be better, and you'll help me protect it." Asha smiled, and Amara knew that this was a new beginning, not only for her, but for everyone in Lumina. Amara was accepted, but her life was far from easy. There were still villagers who doubted her, and she had to prove herself every day. Amara didn't give up. She participated in every village activity, from harvesting crops to taking care of the children, with the hope of bringing good things to Lumina. One morning, as the sun was just rising, Asha ran to find Amara. "Miss Amara, everyone needs your help." The girl's eyes sparkled, no longer holding the confusion of the past. but instead filled with faith and love. Amara took Asha's hand, running with her to the village square, where the people were gathered to begin rebuilding a bridge that had been damaged by the recent storm. Under the guidance of the elders, Amara and the villagers worked together. Laughter filled the air, and there was no longer fear or doubt. Heavy stones were lifted, the bridge was mended, and the relationship between the villagers and Amara was also rebuilt in the process. The people began to see the sincerity and determination of the young woman who had once made mistakes. Sometime later, the people of Lumina decided to hold a festival to celebrate the village's revival. The square was vibrant with colourful ribbons and flowers. Joyful music resounded everywhere. Amara stepped into the centre of the square, wearing a simple dress, yet her beauty shone through in the humility and love she had shown the villagers. Mira, one of the village elders, stepped forward and placed her hand on Amara's shoulder. "You have redeemed yourself," she said, her voice warm and full of pride. "We are very proud of you, Amara." Amara smiled, her eyes brimming with tears, but this time it wasn't out of sorrow or fear. It was out of happiness and emotion. She had overcome the darkness, and now she stood among those she considered her family. As the sun set, Amara looked towards the horizon, knowing that her journey was still far from over. The village of Lumina had changed. Tradition and compassion now coexisted, and Amara had changed as well. From an outsider, she had become an indispensable part of this place. Asha stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, and together they looked towards the future, with courage and hope. From someone who brought trouble, Amara had become a symbol of positive change. She had proven that redemption and determination could help overcome all mistakes, and Lumina was now stronger than ever. After the festival, Amara decided to take some time to speak privately with the elders. She wanted to understand more deeply the core values of Lumina, values that had once been broken and had led the village into danger. Mira and the elders recognized Amara's sincerity and were willing to pass on the lessons of the past. Mira led Amara to the sacred temple, where Amara had once offered a sacrifice to atone for her mistakes. She pointed to the inscriptions on the walls, explaining the history and sacred meaning of Lumina, emphasizing that purity was not just about outward appearances, but about having an honest heart and genuine love. Amara listened intently. Her eyes no longer held the confusion of the past. Instead, there was determination to truly understand what made up the soul of Lumina. She knew that to truly become part of this place, she needed to learn to respect and protect the values that had preserved the community for generations. A few weeks later, Amara began organizing lessons for the young girls in the village. She shared her own story, unafraid to speak about her mistakes and what she had learned. She taught them that true strength did not come from pursuing outward beauty or attention, but from loving and respecting oneself. Asha was always by her side, listening to every word Amara said, her eyes shining with admiration. "Miss Amara, I want to grow up to be like you," Asha said with a bright smile. Amara smiled, gently brushing Asha's hair, and replied, "You will be much better than me. You will help make Lumina the best place where everyone is loved and protected." Day by day, Amara and the villagers worked together, rebuilding not only the damaged houses, but also the trust and affection they had lost. The people gradually understood that unity and forgiveness were the keys to keeping Lumina strong forever. A new dawn rose, this time bringing hope and faith. Amara stood on the hill looking down at Lumina, the village where she had once made mistakes but had now become a symbol of change. Mira stepped up beside her, gently placing her hand on Amara's shoulder. "You've done well, Amara. Lumina is stronger now because of your courage." Amara turned and smiled at Mira. "We will continue to protect this place and never let the darkness return." Life in Lumina gradually revived after all the challenges. Amara was no longer the stranger from the city. She had become part of the community, accepted not only for her atonement, but also for her sincerity and her efforts to improve life in Lumina. One day, Asha ran up to Amara, breathless, with a bright smile on her face. "Miss Amara, look! The trees are green again." Amara turned around, And before her, the fields of flowers that had once withered were now blooming, the trees stretching their branches, full of life. Amara sighed in relief, her heart filled with joy and the belief that what she had done had brought renewal to Lumina. The villagers began to gather, laughter and chatter filling the air. Families returned to the fields for the harvest, children ran freely across the fields, and the stream flowed again, carrying life and fertility. During a village meeting, Mira, the elder whom Amara deeply respected, stood before the entire community. "We have overcome the dark times thanks to everyone's unity," she said, "and thanks to Amara, who dared to face her mistakes and protect Lumina." Mira turned to Amara. "You are not only someone who atoned, but also someone who helped us see the true meaning of purity and love." Amara smiled, her eyes shining with pride and gratitude. "I know what I did is not enough to erase all my mistakes, but I want to stay here and help Lumina grow stronger each day." The villagers applauded, a gesture of appreciation for the courage of the girl they had once distrusted. As time passed, Amara and the villagers worked together to rebuild Lumina. They learned to preserve traditions, but no longer rigidly as before. Purity was not only about the body, but also about the soul and love. Amara and Asha often sat by the stream every afternoon, sharing dreams of the future. "Miss Amara, someday I want to travel everywhere and bring Lumina's stories to everyone," Asha said, her eyes bright with hope. Amara nodded. "You will do it, Asha. Lumina will always be in your heart no matter where you go." A new dawn shone upon Lumina, bringing unity and true strength. The villagers understood that mistakes were a part of life, but what mattered was how we corrected and learned from them. Amara, once a city girl who brought chaos, had now become Lumina's protector. The village flourished again, and in every heart, trust and love rose stronger than ever.